I never thought a pair of shoes could change my life. I was 11 years old that autumn, living in the small town of Millhaven, Ohio, with my mother and my grandmother. We didn't have much. My mother worked double shifts at the diner on Cedar Street, and my grandmother spent most of her days in her rocking chair by the window, knitting things nobody asked for and humming songs I didn't recognize. Our house was old and drafty, and the linoleum floor in the kitchen had a crack down the middle that my mother always said she'd fix someday. But we had enough. That's what my mother always told me. She said it like she believed it. She said it like it was something she needed to hear herself say out loud every so often, just to make sure it was still true. My name is Daniel Mercer, and this is the story of one Tuesday afternoon in October when I walked into a shoe store on Main Street and spent every dollar. I had saved over 4 months on a pair of shoes for a man I had never met before in my life. It started the way most things started back then, with boredom and an errand. My mother had asked me to stop by Henderson's, grocery after school, and pick up a loaf of bread and a can of tomato soup. She'd left $4 on the kitchen counter with a little note written in her careful handwriting, the kind of handwriting that looked like she'd taken her time with every single letter. Danny, bread and soup. Keep the change. Love, Mom. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. I always kept her notes. I still have some of them in a shoebox under my bed. Though I'm a grown man, now and the shoebox has gotten crowded with other things over the years. It was a Tuesday, like I said, the kind of October Tuesday that feels like the whole world is slowly getting ready to go to sleep. The leaves were coming down in long, slow drifts, red and orange and brown, and the air smelled like wood smoke and something sweet that I could never quite name. I remember my sneakers slapping the wet sidewalk as I walked. And I remember how the sky was that particular shade of gray that makes everything underneath. It looked very still and very quiet. I was taking the long way to Henderson's. The long way went past the town square, past the old war memorial with the bronze soldier, who had turned green over the years, past the barbershop where Mr. Kowalski always sat in the window reading the newspaper, past the little bookstore that smelled like dust and vanilla, and past Crawford's shoe store, which had been there since before my mother was born. I don't know why I slowed down when I got to Crawford's. Maybe it was the display in the window. They had put out the new winter boots, lined them up on little wooden stands like they were something precious. Maybe it was because my sneakers had a hole in the left toe and I'd been stuffing a folded piece of cardboard inside to keep out the wet. Maybe I just slowed down for no reason at all, the way you sometimes do when you're 11 and you have nowhere urgent to be. But when I slowed down, I saw him. He was sitting on the low wooden bench that ran along the front of the store, just to the right of the door. It was a bench that had been there as long as the store, dark with age and worn smooth from years of people sitting on it. He was an old man, very old it seemed to me then, though I understand now that he was probably in his mid-70s. He was thin in that particular way that very old people sometimes are, like the years have slowly been paring something away. He wore a dark coat that was clean but old, and his trousers had a careful crease in them that told me someone had ironed them recently, or he had ironed them himself with great effort. But what I noticed, what made me stop completely, were his feet. He wasn't wearing shoes. He was wearing socks, just socks, old gray socks, one of which had a hole at the toe so that the tip of his smallest toe showed through, pale and papery. His feet were resting flat on the sidewalk in front of the bench, and beside his right foot was a paper bag, folded neatly closed at the top. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't looking at the shoe store window. He wasn't looking at the street. He was just sitting there with his eyes half closed and his thin hands resting on his knees, and he had the expression of a man who was very tired and was letting himself be tired for just a moment before he had to get up and do something about it. I stood there on the sidewalk and looked at him for probably 10 or 15 seconds, long enough that he must have sensed it, because he opened his eyes and looked at me. He had blue eyes, pale blue, like the sky in February, and when he looked at me, he didn't seem embarrassed or annoyed. He just looked at me with those calm, pale eyes and gave a small nod, like we knew each other. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was steady and quiet. It had a slight accent that I couldn't place. Not a strong accent, just a gentleness around certain words, a care with the syllables. "Hi," I said. And then, because I was 11 and hadn't yet learned to pretend I hadn't noticed things, I said, "Did you lose your shoes?" He looked down at his socked feet. Then he looked back up at me with an expression that was almost like amusement, though it was too gentle to be called a smile. "Not exactly," he said. "They wore out. I had them resoled twice, but there was nothing left to resole. I threw them away this morning." He nodded toward the store. "I came to buy new ones, but they want $34 for the least expensive pair, and I only have 22. He said it very simply, not with shame, not asking for anything. Just as a statement of fact, the way you might describe the weather. I looked at the paper bag beside his foot. I think he noticed because he said, "I walked here in my socks." I put my old shoes in the bag. But then I looked at them and I thought, what's the point of carrying them? So I threw them away and kept the bag for my groceries. There was something about the way he said this, the practicality of it, the complete absence of self-pity. That did something to me that I couldn't have explained at the time. I think what it did was make him real to me in a way that people often aren't when you first see them. Most of the time you see a person and they're just a person. But sometimes you see someone and you see their whole life pressing up against the edges of the moment. And that's what happened when he told me about his shoes. I stood there for another moment. "I'll be right back," I said. I walked into Crawford's shoe store. The bell above the door rang when I opened it, and the smell of new leather and shoe polish came out to meet me. Mr. Crawford was behind the counter, a heavy man with reading glasses on a chain around his neck and a way of looking at children that suggested he was calculating whether you were there to buy something or to touch things. "Help you?" he said. "How much are your cheapest shoes?" I said. "Men's shoes. For someone old." He looked at me for a moment. "Men's dress shoes start at $34. We have some rubber sole shoes in the back for $28. Do you have anything for $12? "Son, this isn't a thrift store." "I know," I said. "But do you?" He put his glasses on and looked at me over the top of them. "I have a clearance bin in the back. Odds and ends, some things from last season that didn't sell. Let me look." He went into the back room. I stood by the counter and looked at the rows of shoes in their boxes and tried to do the math in my head. I had my mother's $4 in my pocket. I had my savings at home, 3 weeks' worth of lawn mowing money and the birthday, money my grandmother had given me in August, which I'd been saving for a used bicycle. I'd seen in the window of the pawn shop on Elm, $48. It had taken me since late July to save it. Mr. Crawford came back carrying a pair of dark brown shoes. They were plain and sturdy looking with thick rubber soles. "These are a 12, men's 12. They were marked down from 26 to 14 because the left one has a small scuff on the heel. I'll do them for 12. What size does someone need if they're about—" I held my hand up to about where the old man's head had been. "This tall? And thin?" Mr. Crawford blinked. "I'd say about a 9 or 10, depending." He went back to the clearance bin. He came out with another pair, dark navy blue, almost black, with a slight sheen to them. Simple, dignified. 9.5. These were a display pair. Lightwear, marked to 18. I'll do 16. "I'll take those," I said. "You don't know if they'll fit. Can I bring him in to try them on first?" Mr. Crawford looked at me for a long moment. Then he took the shoes off the counter and said, "Bring him in." I went back outside. The old man was still sitting on the bench. He had his hands folded in his lap now, and he was watching a maple leaf make its slow sideways fall from the tree at the edge of the sidewalk. "Excuse me," I said. He looked at me. I think he was surprised I'd come back. People often say they'll be right back, and they aren't. "Would you like to come inside and try some shoes on? Mr. Crawford has a pair I think might fit you." He looked at me for a long time. Not suspiciously, just carefully. The way you look at something you want to make sure you're seeing correctly. "Why?" he said. "Because your feet must be cold," I said. He looked down at his socked feet. A smile moved across his face, slow and quiet, like the leaf he'd been watching. "They are a little," he said. He pushed himself to his feet with some effort, picking up his paper bag. I held the door open for him and the bell rang again when we went in. The shoes fit. Mr. Crawford laced them for him, and the old man sat in the chair and looked down at his feet, turning them slightly left and right. He pressed the toe of one shoe against the floor and flexed his foot inside it. "Very good," he said quietly. He said it to himself, not really to either of us. "How do they feel?" Mr. Crawford said. "Like shoes should feel," the old man said. He looked up at Mr. Crawford with those pale blue eyes. "How much?" $16, Mr. Crawford said. The old man nodded slowly. He reached into his coat pocket and counted out his money. I watched his hands. They were careful hands, the hands of someone who had always had to be careful with money, and he counted out $12 and then stopped. He looked up. I was already putting my mother's $4 on the counter. He looked at the $4. He looked at me. The expression on his face was something I have never forgotten and have never been able to fully describe. It wasn't gratitude exactly, or not only that. It was something more complicated. It was the expression of a man who had perhaps decided somewhere along the way that certain things didn't happen anymore, small kindnesses from strangers, offerings without obligation, and was being proven wrong. "No," he said. "It's fine," I said. "I can't. My mom gives me money for errands sometimes," I said. I was going to keep the change anyway. It wasn't true. She'd written it on the note, "Keep the change." But I'd been planning to put it in my savings. I don't know why I said it the way I did. I think I didn't want him to feel like I was doing him a favor. I think I wanted it to feel small and ordinary, the way good things sometimes have to feel in order to be accepted. He looked at me for another long moment. Then he put his $16 on the counter, my 4 on top of his 12, and Mr. Crawford scooped it up and put the receipt in the bag that the old shoes had come in. We walked out of Crawford's together. On the sidewalk, the old man looked down at his new shoes once more. He took a few steps, testing them. Then he stopped and looked at me. "How old are you?" he said. 11, I said. He nodded. "I am 73, he said. "My name is Walter Hess." "I'm Daniel," I said. "Daniel Mercer." We shook hands. His hand was dry and thin-boned, but his grip was firm. "Are you going somewhere, Daniel Mercer?" he said. "Henderson's grocery," I said. "For bread and soup." "I am going that way myself," he said. So we walked together down Main Street toward Henderson's. The old man in his new navy shoes and me in my sneakers with the cardboard in the toe. The leaves kept coming down. A woman walked past with a small dog. A truck rumbled through the intersection at 3rd and Main, and the driver had his window down and his elbow resting on the door. Walter Hess walked carefully but not slowly. He carried his paper bag under one arm, and he looked at the street, around him the way people look at things. They find genuinely interesting. The details of the storefronts, the old brickwork, the faded letters on the side of the hardware store that said, "Hollis & Son since 1931. You have lived here long?" he said. "My whole life," I said. 11 years. "I have been here 2 months, he said. "I came from Cleveland. My daughter lives here now, on Birch Avenue. I moved here to be near her." He paused. "My wife died in March." I didn't know what to say to that. I said, "I'm sorry." "Thank you," he said. He said it like he meant it, like he was thanking me specifically and not just saying words back at me. She would have liked this town. She always liked small towns. She grew up in a small town in Germany a long time ago, and she said they always felt the same. The way the houses face the street. The way people nod at each other. "Did you grow up in Germany too?" I said. "No," he said. "Vienna, Austria. I came to America in 1962, he glanced at me. "A long time before you were born?" "What do you do?" I said. "What did you do, I mean?" "I was an engineer," he said. "I designed small things, instruments, measuring devices, things that have to be exact." He looked at his hands. "I retired 12 years ago. My wife and I traveled for a while. Then she got sick." He said it without heaviness, or maybe with a heaviness, so settled and familiar that it had become simply part of the sentence, inseparable from the words. "And then we stopped traveling." We reached Henderson's. I held the door for him and we went in together. He bought a small bag of apples and a piece of cheese and a box of crackers. I got the bread and the soup. We paid separately. Outside again on the sidewalk, he held out his hand once more. "Thank you, Daniel," he said. "For the shoes, and for the company." "It was nothing," I said. He shook his head, just slightly. "No," he said. "It was something." He turned and walked south on Main Street toward Birch Avenue, his new shoes quiet on the wet sidewalk. I watched him until he turned the corner. Then I walked home. I didn't tell my mother about the $4. I'm not sure why. Not because I was ashamed, I wasn't. I think it was because it felt private in a way I couldn't explain. Like a dream you want to hold on to before you put it into words and it changes shape. She noticed I didn't have change when I came in, but she didn't say anything about it. She was tired. She'd been on her feet since 6 in the morning and her hair was down and she was making soup even though I'd just brought home a can of soup because she made soup when she was tired. That night I lay in bed and thought about Walter Hess and his $12 and his socked feet and his wife who had died in March and the small town in Germany she'd grown up in. I thought about the way he'd said it was something. I thought about my $48 in the coffee can on my bookshelf. I thought about the bicycle in the pawn shop window. It was a green Schwinn, 3-speed, a little scratched but solid looking. I had decided months ago that it was the bicycle I was going to buy. I had thought about it so many times that it had become mine in my imagination, even though I hadn't bought it yet. I thought about all of that and then I went to sleep. The next Saturday I was raking leaves for Mrs. Peterson 3 streets over, which I did every October for $5, when I saw Walter Hess. He was on the sidewalk in front of the house next door to Mrs. Peterson's. He was standing very still, looking up into a large oak tree. I put down the rake and went to the fence. "Mr. Hess," I called. He turned around. He recognized me immediately. His face did that thing again, the slow, quiet smile. "Daniel Mercer," he said. "What are you looking at?" "There is a bird up there that I cannot identify," he said. He pointed up into the oak. "Do you see it?" "On the 3rd branch from the top toward the left." I squinted up into the branches. I could see a brownish bird, medium-sized, sitting very still. "I think that's a thrush," I said. "My grandmother knows birds. She would know." "A thrush," he said, turning the word over carefully. "Yes, perhaps." I came out through Mrs. Peterson's gate and stood beside him on the sidewalk. We both looked up at the bird for a while. Then it flew away, dropping out of the tree and making a long, low arc down the street before disappearing over a rooftop. "Do you live near here?" I said. "On Birch," he said. "I walk every Saturday morning. My doctor tells me to walk. Do you walk by yourself?" He looked at me. "My daughter works Saturdays, and I don't know many people yet. I could walk with you sometimes," I said. "If you want. I mean, after I finish raking." He considered this with the same careful attention he had given everything else I'd seen him consider. "If you like," he said. So that became a thing. Every Saturday that fall, once I'd finished whatever odd jobs I had in the morning, I would meet Walter Hess on the corner of Birch and 3rd, and we would walk. We walked all over Millhaven. He wanted to know the town, and I knew it well enough to show him. Not the important buildings or the historic sites, but the things a kid knows. Where the creek went under the old railroad bridge. Which house on Maple had a dog that barked at everyone. The alley behind the movie theater where the popcorn smell drifted out through the ventilation. The spot at the edge of the park, where you could see 3 different church steeples at once. He told me about Vienna, about the streetcars and the coffee houses and the Danube, which he said wasn't blue, whatever the song claimed, but brownish green and very wide and very cold. He told me about engineering, which I had thought would be boring, but wasn't the way he explained it. The philosophy of it, the idea that you could impose precision onto an imprecise world, that you could build something that would measure correctly, even when everything else was approximate. He told me about his wife, Ingrid. Not all at once, but in pieces. The way you tell a story when it still hurts too much to tell it whole. She had been a school teacher. She had loved gardening, but had no talent for it, which she found funny about herself. She had read 3 books a week her entire adult life and never, in her opinion, read enough. She had made a soup with parsnips and apples that Walter said was the best thing he had ever eaten, and he had never learned the recipe. "You didn't ask her to write it down?" I said. "I thought there would be more time," he said. He said it without bitterness, just as a fact. One of those facts that could break your heart if you let it, which was why, I think, he said it in that flat, careful tone and to keep it from doing that. We walked, and the leaves finished falling, and the November cold came in off the lake and turned the world gray and bare. We kept walking even in the cold. Walter wore a scarf and gloves. I wore my hooded sweatshirt. My mother bought me a second-hand winter coat at the church rummage sale in November, and after that I was warm enough. I never bought the green Schwinn. By the time I had enough saved again, it was gone from the pawn shop window. And I found that I didn't mind as much as I thought I would. One Saturday in December, Walter invited me in for tea. His apartment was on the ground floor of a house on Birch that his daughter had helped him find. It was small but very orderly. His books were on a shelf in the living room, arranged in a way that looked like it had been thought about. His desk by the window had papers on it organized into careful stacks. In the kitchen there was a photograph on the refrigerator. A woman in a garden, middle-aged, laughing at something off camera, her hand raised to push her hair out of her face. She was wearing gardening gloves and she had soil on her forearm. She looked very alive. I looked at it while Walter made tea. "That's Ingrid," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," he said. 2 summers ago. She was always killing things in that garden, but she loved it. We sat at the kitchen table and drank tea, and ate biscuits from a tin that his daughter had sent. Walter asked me about school. I told him about my teacher, Mr. Abernathy, who had a theory that every subject was really the same subject if you went back far enough, which I thought was interesting even though I wasn't sure it was true. I told him about my friend Marcus, who was the best basketball player in our grade and also the worst speller, and how those two facts seemed unrelated, but Marcus said they were connected because they both had to do with how your brain organized space. Walter found this interesting. He thought about it for a while. "He might be right," he said. "That's what I said," I said. He smiled. "You are a thoughtful boy, Daniel Mercer." I didn't know what to say to that. I looked at my tea. "I mean it," he said. "It is not so common. People either think too much about themselves and not enough about others, or they think too much about others and exhaust themselves with it. You seem to think about the right things." "I just do what seems like the right thing to do," I said. "Yes," he said. "That is what I mean." Christmas came. My mother gave me a book and a pair of gloves and made a ham. My grandmother gave me $5 and a knitted scarf that was the most perfectly symmetrical thing she had ever made. Marcus and I exchanged baseball cards at school on the last day before break. It was a good Christmas. On Christmas Eve afternoon, I walked to Birch Avenue and knocked on Walter's door. I had a small package with me, a book about birds of Ohio that I had found at the used bookstore for $3 because of the thrush in October. I had wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with a red string. He opened the door and looked at me and at the package, and then at me again. "Daniel," he said. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Hess," I said. He stood aside to let me in. On his kitchen table there was a small package, too, also wrapped in brown paper, with my name on it in his careful European handwriting. He had known I might come. I gave him his book. He opened it slowly, with the same care and deliberateness with which he did everything, and he turned the pages and looked at the illustrations and then looked up at me with his pale eyes. "Thank you," he said. His package for me was a compass, an old one, silver engraved, the kind that folded into itself like a pocket watch. On the inside of the lid, in very small letters, it said Vienna, 1938. It had a small dent on one edge, and the needle swung smoothly and settled north without hesitation. "It was my father's," he said. He gave it to me when I left Vienna. He said, "When you go far from home, it helps to know which direction is north, even if you don't use it for navigation, even if you only take it out sometimes and look at it." I turned it over in my hands. "I can't take this," I said. "I have no children to give it to," he said. "My daughter has 2 daughters of her own, and neither of them is the kind of person who would want a compass. You are." I looked at it. I looked at him. "Thank you," I said. "You thanked me first," he said. "In October, in front of a shoe store. This is overdue." We kept walking on Saturdays through the winter and into the spring. In March, on the anniversary of Ingrid's death, Walter didn't say anything about it when we met on the corner. We just walked. We went further than usual that day, all the way to the edge of town where the road went out into the flat farmland, and we stood for a while looking at the fields, which were still gray and dead-looking but had a green tinge beginning at the edges, the very first suggestion of something coming. He said at some point on the way back, "She would have liked you." I didn't say anything. I just walked beside him. "She was always the one who noticed people," he said. I was too caught up in my work for most of my life. She was the one who saw them. I am trying to learn it from her now that she is gone. He paused. I think I'm getting better at it. I thought about that for a long time. About how you could learn something from someone even after they were gone. About how a person could go on teaching you things they'd never known. They were teaching. My dad left when I was 4, I said. It came out before I decided to say it. I don't remember him. My mom says he was a good person who just couldn't handle things. I don't know if that's true or if she just says it to make me feel better. It might be both, Walter said. Yeah, I said. I think so too. We walked. Your mother is a good person, he said. You don't know her, I said. I know you, he said. And you had to come from somewhere. By the time school let out for summer, Walter Hess had become something I couldn't easily name. Not a grandfather. I had a grandfather somewhere. My mother's father, who sent a card at Christmas and nothing else. Not a teacher exactly, though I learned things from him. Not a friend, the way Marcus was a friend, with all the pushing and joking and competition that came with that. Something else. Something quieter and more particular. He was a person who had lived a long time and lost a great deal and had come to a point where he was trying, consciously and carefully, to pay attention to things. And somehow I had gotten to walk alongside that for a while. The last Saturday before school started again in September, we walked to the park and sat on the bench by the pond. The pond had geese on it. They weren't doing anything interesting, just being geese, floating and occasionally dunking, their heads and arguing with each other in that irritable goose way. Walter took out a small notebook he had started, carrying that summer, and wrote something in it. He did this sometimes, small observations, things he wanted to remember, a plant he couldn't name, a snatch of overheard conversation, the way the light fell at a particular time of day. What did you write? I said. He turned the notebook so I could see. The geese are arguing again. Dee says this is because they are always hungry. I think it is because they are not very bright. We agree these might be the same thing. I laughed. He capped his pen. What will you do with yourself? He said. Now that school is starting. Same things, I said. School, odd jobs, walking. You have plans? He said, for your life. Or is it too early for plans? I thought about it. I want to do something that helps people, I said. I don't know what yet. Maybe a doctor? Maybe something else. He nodded slowly. You will figure it out, he said. You are the kind of person who figures things out. How do you know? He looked at me. Because last October, a boy I had never met saw an old man sitting on a bench in his socks and decided, on his own, without being asked, to do something about it. That kind of person figures things out. I looked at the geese. I just did what seemed right, I said. Yes, he said. That is the whole thing, Daniel. That is the entire secret. Most people know what is right. Very few just do it, simply, without making a production of it. You walked into a store. You put $4 on a counter. You didn't explain yourself or wait to be thanked. You just did it and moved on. He paused. I have been thinking about that since October, about what it means to be that kind of person. Whether it can be learned or whether you are simply born with it. I think it can be learned, I said. I hope so, he said. I am 74 years old and I am still trying to learn it. I carry the compass everywhere. I'm a man in my 30s now, and I'm a doctor, a general practitioner in a small town not far from Millhaven. I have a wife and a daughter who is 4 years old and already has opinions about everything. My mother is retired and her linoleum is still cracked. My grandmother died 6 years ago, and her rocking chair is in my living room now. Walter Hess died when I was in my 2nd year of medical school. His daughter called me. He had gone peacefully, she said, in his apartment on Birch Avenue, with his books on the shelf and his papers in their careful stacks. He had left a note in his kitchen with a short list of people to call. My name was on it. I drove back to Millhaven the following weekend. I walked some of the routes we used to walk. I went past Crawford's shoe store, which was still there. Still had the bench out front. I sat on the bench for a while. I thought about all the things you can't predict. The small turns, the incidental moments, the $4 left on a counter. How nothing that came afterward, the friendship, the compass, the Saturday mornings, the things I learned about how to look at the world, none of it would have happened if I had just walked past. Thought about what Walter said. that it can be learned, that most people know what's right, that the whole secret is just doing it. Think about that when I'm in the exam room with a patient who is scared. I think about it when I'm tired and it's late and there's one more call to make. I think about it when my daughter asks me why we should be kind to people we don't know, and I tell her, because they are sitting on a bench somewhere in their socks and it is cold, and you can help. She asks me how. I know that. I take the compass out of my pocket and show it to her. She holds it in her small hands and watches the needle swing and settle. North. She says, yes, I say. That's north, and we sit for a while, the two of us watching the needle hold its steady, faithful course, true as a kindness given for no reason, pointing always toward something worth walking toward.